Cast. All right, what's going on, everyone? Happy Monday. Happy post-Easter Monday. Is that a thing? Like post-Easter? Yeah. Does it mean people like aren't ready for work? They're more ready for work, or what does it mean?
I think more ready for work because the days just bleed together. So how do you tell them apart anymore?
I think that's the truth, man. I think that's definitely the truth. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, and we've got we've got people starting to roll in now. So everyone, do me a favor, a couple kind of quick things here. Just make sure, drop your questions in the comments as we go through this. I'm going to be kind of curating some of these. I think, Chris, you had hit me up first, right? Saying like, hey, we should get on here, start talking about a little sales, science or art or both, or what the mix looks like. And you know, everyone, as you're coming in here, just also drop us your company name and your role. So that way we know if we've got like more, salespeople, we've got senior account executives, we've got sales leaders. So as you come in the chat or in the comments, drop your name. Well, you don't really need to drop your name. I kind of know what your name is already. Drop your company name and your role, and we'll try our best to kind of tailor things. And then, like I said, just drop the questions in the Q&A. As we go through this, and that'll allow us to kind of tailor a little bit of the conversation too. So, all right.
Shout out to Fran.
What's up?
Shout out to Fran and the Revenue Collective. He saw my posting. The marketing tactics work.
All right, there we go. I like that. He said, "Yeah, here we go." Kristen Respirator Cluster. There we go. Love that. All right. Yeah, we've got Mike. What's up, Mike? Mike joins a lot of this stuff, which is great. Martin, construction, integrate. All right, and then again, we got some Q&A. Lee Mash dropped who he is in the Q&A. That's all right, Lee. Make sure to you can drop the questions in the Q&A or in the comments, either one. We'll find you. I'll find you. Ben Harbert, this guy, Ben Harbert. I love this dude. Ben has probably been, I'm just guessing. I'm going to guess Ben has attended 10 Jake Dunlap webinars in the last 2 weeks. He keeps getting the new. I love it. He said easily. All right, cool. So let's just go around and start. Art, science of sales. So Chris, how many years of sales experience do you have, roughly, ballpark?
I got roughly, I think I'm around 3 years right now.
3 years experience. So you're new to sales, right? Relatively new, okay? So I'll start with you, right? How do you see this kind of conversation around art versus sales, right? Science, right? So you've got an art side, a science side. How do you view the difference between the two, and what, from your experience?
Yeah, for me, like I view the science as like the very logical, processes. You have an outbound process. You got to get a meeting. You need to move it forward. You need to close your business. So for me, like the science of it is very like logical, but then the art is your creativity of how do you go prospect? How do you put in that messaging? How do you create that amazing sales experience? Because sometimes you're in a commoditized industry like mine, so there's not a lot of value to sell. Ergo, your art needs to be amazing unless you want to have a price war.
Okay. All right. So tell me more about that. So you've got this concept of the price, right? So you've got that side of it. So give me an idea of the art. You know what I mean? What is like a tactic or something that you would consider like an art of sales?
To me, the art of sales is like, I use something called a crumpled letter for prospecting. And it's literally like you crumple up a piece of paper, put it in a red envelope, say Jake equals VIP, very important person. I send it to you in like the mail. Well, nowadays I make videos because no one's in the office. Right. And like within the letter, it's just such a compelling message. So you have some fun with it. You're saying that, 95% of the sales stuff that you get is baloney. So I've done you the favor of pre-crumpling the letter. But, my hope is that you'll spend the next 30 seconds just seeing if I'm the light at the end of your tunnel, a little bit of blurb about who you are, making it kind of funny, and then just some ways that you can basically serve someone like yourself. And then you're just going to say, like, I know you're incredibly busy, so I'm going to try Twitter, smoke signals, carrier pigeons. I don't care. I'm going to get a hold of you somehow. Look forward to formally introducing myself. Boom. And then you do that. And like that creates an experience just from like day one. And like that's the art to it.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like there's obviously some things you're doing from like a rapport, like getting outside the box, right? Yeah. So you're thinking of ways to get outside the box, but then hypothetically, right? And then Ken, I want to get your take. I could just rip that play off and go run that with 85 reps.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a science.
Right.
You know, but so it's I think it's the what I'm hearing is it's the ability to think outside the box, right? And then the box, because again, what happens is then you'll probably evolve to the next thing. You're not resting on your laurels, you know,
No.
of like, oh, this is the best thing. You're probably already trying new stuff too, I guess.
Yeah, because like what I've done is since I can't mail things anymore, I make videos and they're like a minute long. So I saw someone asking, so keep them to no more than a minute. And like I walk you through the experience of the crumpled letter. I literally crumple it up in my hand. I throw it off screen. You're having a whole experience with me. You're usually laughing because I'm laughing at myself that I'm like that like crazy to go do that on a video, send it to like a CEO or like a VP. But that's what creates that experience. It's the one-to-one human connection. So you're constantly evolving it, because
Right.
what worked today is not guaranteed to work tomorrow. So there's your art for sure.
Okay, cool. All right. What about you, Ken? What do you think? Art, science?
Chris, I usually crumple up people's resumes and then throw them in the garbage. So that's my art. I think, well, first of all, I'm glad to be here. I've been in sales and selling since 87. Started a sports memorabilia business while I was in high school, and been in sales in the payment processing industry since the early 90s up until 2013. You know, one of my one-liners is the art of selling ain't worth the frame it's in if you don't know how to hang it. So I think it's important to, I think everyone has their own, what I call signature sales moves. And I think that's what I'm hearing from Chris. And that definitely is the art, and it's part of who you are. It's your personality, your persona. So there's ways to leverage that in conversations. And especially important with me as well, when I was in a high commodity sale like merchant services and payment processing, you really have to think outside the box of how you can build relationships up with these people quickly and build trust. And I think part of that is the art of it. But as far as the science, and you know, if you think of sports people, they all have, you know, some of the best athletes in basketball had their own signature moves, and you can't emulate that. You can't mimic that. That's something that Chris owns or I own. And if someone's going to try to copy that with 30 other reps, it's going to come across inauthentic. It's not going to be natural. It's going to land basically dead on arrival. The science part, I mean, for me is I always thought it was 80% art, 20% science in sales when I first got into sales. I was a door-to-door sales guy, sort of like Chris. I was, you know, knocking on doors till my knuckles bled. And I'm like, let me just be cool and confident and develop my own swag and conversation. And it wasn't until years later I realized it's the opposite. It's 80%, at least for me, 80% science, 20% art. There's systems in place that you need to follow. There's metrics that are important to know. And the whole science of the sale makes your art, makes your conversation, I think, that much more compelling. So we can get into like the different parts of the science and within the funnel, but I think a lot of people want to avoid the science because they don't want to be thought as managing the metrics and the KPIs, which are absolutely important. As much as I prefer not to delve into them, you can't escape it.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel, and maybe either one of you can take this, why do you think people avoid the science? Why do you think people gravitate toward, you know, other things, right? They gravitate toward doing it their own way. They gravitate toward, you know, not having a process or having less of a process, or they think they follow a process.
Yeah, my take is it takes a lot more thinking to think about the science. We all have our own natural default way of doing things, and by nature it's by default. So if it's by default, it's very easy. You don't have to think about it. You're not really even mindful of it. You're just doing. And that will get you only so far. And there's very good reps out there. And I was one of them when I first started. You can get pretty far that way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're going to get to be a superstar. And to think about the science and delve into the details and the numbers and the metrics, it takes time. It's tedious. And until you start realizing the wins that you can get from it,
Yeah.
that momentum won't be there. But once you understand, wow, let me look at the numbers, let me look at how many calls I made, the activities, let me come up with the equations that are getting me these results, then you could tweak and change, and you're like, wow, this makes sense. And you start having wins that way, and then eventually you buy into that. So I think it's just easier to work and live by default. It takes very little effort.
Yeah, you're winging it. It's interesting though, Ken. I feel like you're talking a lot about the numbers side, but what about the sales process itself? Like, I believe that there is a right and a wrong way to move people through the buyer journey. Like, I believe that there is a science between how you start a meeting, run a discovery process, move people through, drive momentum in the next steps, put together a proposal. Like, I believe that a lot of the science is in the numbers for sure, but also it's just, there's human nature, right? There's tons and tons of books around predictably irrational and thinking fast and slow and emotional intelligence, that people also behave in a relatively predictable, unpredictable way. And so I feel like a lot of the science of the sale that I feel like sellers miss is appreciating and understanding that. They don't understand that.
Right. I mean, you're not going to move someone into a demo on your first call without doing some discovery and understanding what the demo is going to be about and what's important to that prospect and buyer. If you're shoving demos to people on right away, I think that's where the science comes in from the answers that you're getting back from your prospect based on the questions you ask. So as far as science in the funnel, I think questions Q&A is the science. That's why scripts are somewhat important, so that you hit upon the right questions to uncover the responses that you need to know how to move it to that next stage.
And like I would also chime in, like I think to your point, Jake, like there is a certain progression that is linear. And to me, the art is like how you do it. It's like, how do you run your discovery call, right? And each rep's going to have their unique way. And I think that's where sometimes the science and art will start butting heads, is everyone wants you to kind of be a robot and like do it this way because it's proven. But we're all individuals and we all have different communication styles, different preferences, different ways of thinking. And so for me, like what I see is like, especially like my discovery calls, like I'll run those like a certain way. My colleague runs them differently. But as long as at the end of it, we're getting all the information we need, at least to me, like I wouldn't really care. We got the info that we needed. How we did it's totally going to vary based on each rep. But I think there needs to be toll gates in place where it's like, if you haven't gotten this information in your discovery call, you don't get to do the demo because you haven't gotten the right information to do an effective demo. And then that's an opportunity to go back and look at how you're applying your craft and maybe refine that, whatever it may need to be.
But I wonder, Chris, if I listened to your discoveries, how different they actually would be, right? Like, I wonder if they would be that different. Because I'll tell you, so Ross Van Wyck, he made a comment in here in the chat. He said, the art of selling is on the rep, and it is something that is individual and authentic to each rep on the team, their selling style. And I think you're kind of saying some of that too, right? Like, there's like these toll gates. I got to be honest, I believe the exact opposite. Like, I believe that like there is a right and a wrong way to walk through it, and that there's tweaks to it, but like there is a right and a wrong way to run a discovery process. Like, and you're right. Like, you could get there, but I also believe that there's an optimal way to run it. And there's an optimal way that you can put your flavor on, you know what I mean? Like, you can do that, but like, look, until you can prove that you can generate X number of outcomes from a discovery, you don't get to do it your way. You do it the way that I know generates the X number of optimal outcomes. So I don't agree with Ross. And I just wonder, Chris, again, if I listen to you two, if they would be more similar. I think in sales, we hear a lot of the outliers, as opposed to actually, Chris, you guys each ask the questions somewhat similar. So that's like, for me, the big issue that I have is that, and I'll tell you, it kind of comes from my own experience, and I'll tell you guys that, and then I want you guys to jump in. I was 26. I'd been in sales for about 3 years, 2.5 years. And I was already a top seller because I did telemarketing in college too. You guys knocked on doors. I sold people MCI long distance. I got you to timeshare pitches. I had to get your credit card over the phone. Like I did a lot of, so I had a lot of raw ability, but it wasn't until I went to Career Builder and there was a script, like very specific ways that they had written it out. And I was the second to last person. It was a month in, I hadn't sold anything. And, you know, my director, my boss's boss comes to me and I'm like, dude, Evan, I don't know what's going on. Like, I know I'm good. Like, I know that I can be good. And he's like, dude, he's like, I listened to your call. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, follow the script, like follow the order of operations and the messaging and the way that we say it. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, I'm a special flower, Chris. Like I got my own thing. Like I got it. He's like, dude, do you think we are stupid? Would you think we train 1,000 people on a sales process that doesn't work? And that for me was just like this immediate epiphany. I'm like, oh, well, probably not. And then I started doing it. I sold 60,000 in new business the next month. And I was like, holy shit, I'm literally, and it sounded robotic, Ken, to your point. And the first time I'm like, okay, so tell me more about, but as I made it my own, but I still followed the process. And if I didn't follow the process, maybe I wouldn't have ever been successful. I don't know. So that's my take on the process. Like, I believe there is a right and a wrong way to put this stuff together and then iterate on it. So that's my like hot take on it.
If you look at you know, franchises and my company that I had for 6 years called Yard to Kitchen, which I did all the sales for the first several years to perfect the process. When we brought on sales reps, they followed that process to the T. There was a way they had to ask certain questions. They had to go through a process on the phone. And then when they met with the clients, whether it was residential or restaurants or corporate management companies we dealt with, they had to follow the steps to show value. How they communicated that and how they presented it is partly art. I did it on paper. I literally drew it out. Here's your design. This is what we supply. And, you know, one of the things I always asked a prospect, even in B2B, is most important part of this process. Do you know who that is or what that is? And they'd say, well, the irrigation or whatever. No, it's you. And to me, that's part of the art also, is bringing that into the fold of something that another rep or another company is not saying, and doing it in a way that's authentic. But they couldn't escape this system that I created, just like McDonald's, just like franchises. That's why they're successful, because you follow this. So I think putting your art into it is more of your tone, some one-liners,
that's right,
you know, catchy phrase, authenticity that is, you know, over the top. Like, I've never heard someone say that before. It's like, yeah, well, because it's the truth. That's, to me, where you separate the systematic sales reps to the ones that really put in their signature moves and the superstars.
Yeah, I love that. I agree 100%. Like, and I think my point is, and then Chris, I want you to, you know, you can chime in if you want to. I can build an army of B players. I know it. I can build an army of B players. And again, so I'm going to give some specific examples. People are asking some, I'll get specific with it, but I can't get you to an A. An A is more than just hard work and dedication. If you've got hard work and dedication, I can turn you into most likely a B player. And as you grow and scale, you need that. You know, like, not everybody can be an A player, right? And if you're a small business and you got 4 or 5 guys winging it, gunning it, you don't need that, right? But if not, as you grow and scale, you do. So I think that's it. That I agree with you, Ken, that the process and the science gets you to here. And if you execute the science experiment well, you should get a fairly consistent outcome, right? If you're executing the parts of the process. But, you know, without the flair or like those types of things that separate it, I don't think you can be, you know, you can be an A player.
Yeah, like, I think, Jake, like, what I would add to it is, to your point, like, if you're just coming in, like, there's a foundation in place for a reason. And like your company had a very solid sales process. I've walked into startups that had nothing. So we're literally just making it from scratch. So part of my thinking was from that perspective, but hearing from your specific story, I 100% agree. Come in, follow the script. It's there for a reason. There's 1,000 people doing this. This is proven with tons of data. So that's step one. Then step two, once you start getting success, okay. Now step three is where we get into mastery, and that's the art, and that's where you bring out the personality, your one-liners, whatever it is, and that's how you become an A player. But for sure, like I'm not saying come in and cowboy it all and just say screw it. Like
of course not.
There's some stuff to do. Now with a startup, you might have to do a little bit more cowboying to kind of figure it out, just because that's the environment that you're in. But once you get that kind of 80% of the way there with the science, now the goal is to make it a scalable, repeatable process. And then you also need to give the framework of how to transition a B player to an A player, realizing that like you can show them the way, but the person needs to pick that torch up and carry it. I can only show you how to get to the A level. I can't do the work for you. But as a leader, it is your job to at least show them the way and encourage them to go there. Ultimately, that decision's on each single rep.
Yeah, I think that's right, man. And I think you can, as a leader, it's almost a different. My job is to remove the roadblocks, help you to see what that can look like, how you're going to get there, et cetera. So we got a lot of questions coming in. So we can sit here and punt.
These questions are fun. Yeah, let's jump into some questions.
More inherent, how to truly think of it. We've talked a little bit about that one. Yeah, Nikki Ivy's had a few comments in here where she kind of commented through just that, this concept that this like art and science, it's like, hold on, let me go find it, because I thought it was really good. It was art is creating like the experience and science is scaling the art or something like that. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of dope. I might steal that for sure. All right.
That's a good one-liner.
All right. So, all right, so let's do this one. So Larry Trenwith, what's up, Larry? Larry says, Jake, you just said a lot of the science is in the numbers. Aren't the numbers just how we measure how well we're executing the science? The numbers aren't the science. The science is the techniques, process for discovery, objection handling, etc. The numbers is this in science, etc. Yeah, I think it's a combination of the process and then the outcomes it produces. So you've got to analyze the outcomes that it produces to then go back and iterate the process. So I don't think we're saying anything different than what Larry's saying here, because it is both, right? It's like you have to have, because the other thing is you can't try to, like you said, especially Chris, in a startup, what I see is you kind of like try one approach, then you try a completely different approach, and then, you try a completely different approach, and like you don't learn anything that way either, because you're not isolating the variables.
Right. I'd say if you're going to set up an experiment, like you need to run it for like 30, 60, 90 days, like this pivoting 24/7.
Yeah.
You don't have a real process in place. And that's what really frustrates me in the startup industry is there's so many pivots. You need to run the strategy. You need to commit. So you need to make sure everyone's on board. You committed to at least like 30 days of testing or whatever your time frame is, that you lock it all down and you just run it. And then you look back at the numbers and then you iterate and pivot. But you can't keep doing all this like micro pivoting because you're going to muddy your results. And then you don't really know what's causing like the cause and effects because you didn't run your test properly.
Yeah.
So in I just want to bring up an analogy or an example. In running, most people who run, myself and others, you can run by pace, you can run by heart rate, you can run by perceived effort. And then you can run by power, which is now a new way of running. So cyclists know that with power, they understand that terminology. With running, there's a company, and no, I don't work for them, but I use their technology called Stride. And it's a pod, it goes on your shoe. It gives you all the data and a lot of data to analyze your running efficiency and your stride and your ground contact and your leg stiffness, et cetera, et cetera. If I just collect that data, it's meaningless. But if I analyze the data and compare it over time to the similar races or similar runs, all of a sudden there's information there. So now my art of running is, my style, right? Am I more a toe striker, heel striker? Do I move my arms up and down more than others? But there's a science that you can't escape, and that data is perfectly exemplified in Stride, being that now I have stuff to analyze and tweak. And I haven't run my best races until I started using the science of running to better perform. So sales is no difference. And those numbers are crucial to go through, whether it's the conversation or the funnel, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Hey, Jake, I saw one on like identifying your ICP, your ideal customer profile. Do you mind if we take a swing at that? Because I'm super passionate about that, because that's really the crux of all your outbound. So I don't know who saw it. Sorry, I'm on a mobile phone and things are just flying by. But essentially, like when I think about coming up with your ideal customer profile, it's really value and benefits as your customer has defined it. And if you don't know what your customer is saying about your products, then you need to go hold informational interviews, talk to customer success, ask to talk to 5-10 customers that recently bought within the last 30 to 45 days. There's something called jobs to be done, and it's a whole interview process. And you basically turn on that recorder, 30 minutes, ask all the questions, get it recorded. And what you're going to do is you're going to look through all those recordings and pick out those keywords, those pain points, those challenges, the value and benefits that they defined it. Yeah. That then flips into your outbound. So that's your email, that's your phone calls, that's your marketing material. And you can just flip a pain point. Like if someone's struggling, I don't know, let's just say like marketing, right? And they don't know anything about their marketing, like who's coming inbound. It's like struggling to understand your, customer and the platforms they're coming from. And then you can start talking about how you're able to solve that without talking about your product. Don't say my product does ABC percentage. Talk about my product enables you to connect with your customer on a one-to-one basis. That's what someone's going to care about, because that's the value and benefits they've shared with you during those interviews. So I think if you don't know your call scripts, you need to kind of research your customer and your industry, do Google, look at the trends, and then also personify to the seniority rank. So like a CEO is going to care about the long-term strategy. Like just like you, Jake, you're a 3 to 5 year kind of planner right now. I mean, you also get in the trenches, but just be the CEO example for the moment. Yeah. Ken's going to care about your strategy as well, but he needs to also care about what his director is saying. That director is going to be definitely more tactical and wants to get into the strategy. The manager's just like, how do I get my ground level people more effective and getting them producing more? And your, low level person in the trenches is just like, how can I do this job as effectively as possible? So the same message can go to everybody up the chain, but you need to match them at their level and what they're focused on. And you can get that via talking to your customers.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in what you're hitting on is I feel like a lot of training programs are not focused on what you're talking about, which is, again, for me, a lot of, there's been some questions in here about like, how do I go about starting my script? How do I go about starting my process? How do I start going about and what you're saying, Chris, is it starts with the customer. Like if you don't know what their issues are and then how to kind of reverse engineer a process that kind of, addresses those, either, first a way to understand those issues. And then second, a way to explain what you do in a way that addresses those issues. That's what you're optimizing for early on, right? Like the questions I need to ask to pull this out for this person to have their own realization or not and move on, right? And then a way to articulate what we do in terms of outcomes, like what we produce versus what the thing is. And so, there's a couple of questions earlier in the chat. We've already moved past it, but that's my advice for anyone starting. It is exactly what Chris said. If I was a brand new seller, it's the very first thing I would do. I'd go sit with customer success for a week and I would just hear, okay, people don't do that. They complain about our product. They do that. They do this. Okay, well, what about that? Etc. You go run your Zendesk chat or whatever it is for a week. You're going to start to really quickly learn like what resonates with people, what the issues are, etc. So I love that approach.
Right. And then I would just add like niche it down to your vertical too. So like one of the things I've always wanted to test is like grab all your sellers, pick an industry. Like let's say it's logistics right now. All your sellers need to go do all the research and then have a pitch contest. Who can pitch it the best? And then you'll judge each other, all that stuff. Maybe bring in some of your customers and have some fun with it. This is a way to add more value, not just do a QBR. right? Bring them into your process because they want to help you create too. And then once you get that information down, have marketing blast that. That is a nice drip campaign right there. Have everyone focus on a vertical. So it's kind of like go through each of your verticals and do that for your 2-3 week blitz. Get all that material down. And so when you hire new people and they know their territory and it's usually geography, so it kind of groups together by vertical, you now have all your research done, you're verticalized, like you are so personalized and ready to go. It gets silly. Like that's what I would love to see us start doing, going forward and being smarter, because you can't get to your pitch until you've done all this pre-work prior. Then your pitch is just going to be a consequence of all the research that you've done.
Yeah. It's an outcome. That's that's the whole closing thing. Companies come to us, they go, Jake, we need better rebuttal handling, negotiation, closing. I'm like, okay, so you have a discovery problem. They're like, no. Discovery is fine. I'm like, no, you have like every single time, like the close is an outcome of a well-executed process. Yes. And that goes back to this concept that the process is like very, very similar. And I think we choose to see, because the delivery, Chris, is different, and Ken, because the delivery is different, we tend to see the nuances as opposed to what's actually the same, right? Like every deal, and I'm telling you, we've worked with thousands of companies now, it's very similar. There's like a discovery phase, like, is there something here? Then there's an initial evaluation where you bring in other people. Then there's a formal evaluation, which could be a proof of concept, an extended trial, or vetting more seriously. Then you go into onboarding. Then you go on to initial adoption. Then you go on to power usage, and then you go on to renewal. It's the same fucking thing for every product. Every product, exact same steps. And I feel like that is the science side of it. And then it's like an accordion, or like, this part's a little more nuanced for this type of sale because these buyers behave this way. So the formal evaluation's a little bit longer or shorter, or this is a transactional sale. So I've got to get someone, I've got to make sure that we get through the initial and formal evaluation as fast as possible because it's a transactional. But I feel like we all look for the outliers, as opposed to like, there actually is like a very similar way, especially in B2B. That people kind of move through this process or exit the process, and people should exit the process at any stage too. So Chris, I'll drop a whole line on this later. I think this is a really good one. I want to take Nikki's question, which talks about, are we teaching too much science or too much art, and how is it affecting sellers' experiences and outcomes? Right. So she's saying like, right now, does the coaching culture in B2B sales line up with what reps need in terms of learning the right balance of science and art? Right. So like, are we teaching too much of one or the other right now?
I think it goes back to 80-20 rule for me. I think that until you've really honed in on the science aspect, and you articulate it really well, Jake, with the discovery, the evaluation. I mean, that's also in B2C. It's the same across the board. It's really all the same. But until a sales rep, at least my experience, both with myself and working with hundreds of reps, is until you really fine tune that. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you wait for perfect, nothing happens. But it has to be good. And until it's good, and you base that on, obviously, using technology to hear them through their process, whether using Gong or other tech stack, and their results or lack of, then you can dive into being more creative within that and bring out their strengths and uncover their signature sales move. Every rep has a signature sales move, every one of them. It's different for everyone, but I think a good coach can help them explore that and leverage that, whatever it may be for you. So that could be done within all those different stages. It's not linear, right? You can. It's more of a circle, right? So I think that reps tend to focus more on the art. It's cool to talk about. It's great to post on LinkedIn, and give high fives to your bros. But at the end of the day, that science has, and I do it also, that science has to be there. Otherwise the art, to me, is going to be DOA. It's going to land dead on arrival.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure you can give it like a blanket answer because I think it's unique for each company and where they are in their process, but there's just some basics that you need to have. Do you have your sales funnel figured out? Like, do you have the process? Do you know how it works? Okay, you need to triage it. Where are your problems? Like, why are you losing your deals, or why are you not getting your pipeline? You know, and then from there, I think you'll have a better understanding of, okay, we have a messaging issue because we're not getting the messaging. Well, are you focusing on the wrong ICP? Like, there's so many ways to triage it. So like I'm hesitant to just give a black or white answer. I think you need to triage it, and from there it becomes really apparent on what needs to get done. But until you have that data and science, like we were talking earlier, you don't even know where to begin. You're just kind of shooting in the dark. So my advice would be, get down and dirty with your numbers, make sure you understand what's going on, and then you can start understanding, do we have an art or science issue on our hands at the moment?
I mean, you have a basic, I mean, I work with a lot of startups, and I've started several startups on my own without knowing necessarily I always go into finding out who the ideal client is, the A and Bs, right? And then the Cs and Ds are your cancers and destroyers, and you don't want them. And it really, it takes, when you get the ICP down to your exact client prospect, it makes all this much easier. And most importantly, for me and the reps I've dealt with, how do we make it more fun? And when you're answering calls or making calls or knocking on doors, and I've done outbound, inbound, and door to door, and you're going after not that ideal client, it's painful, and it becomes not fun. So companies owe it to themselves, their salespeople, to really narrow that down. But you don't always know that ICP though until you get in it and you start selling and you start discovering. In some cases it's easier in some industries than others, but others you really have to just be a trailblazer, which Chris talked about earlier, and pave the way. And that trailblazer rep is going to define that process for you, and build that out organically. And then you bring on, whether it's a VP or a manager, and then you refine it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, look, the good news is, I mean, hopefully what you're hearing, whether we're labeling it one or the other or a combination, is not that inconsistent, right? Like, I think we're all actually saying things, and even as I'm trying to kind of keep up with the chat here and what people are talking about, it's kind of like different flavors of it. So that's good. I like that people at least are like understanding this. A couple people are commenting on it. There's a couple other questions I want to kind of hop in here on, if you guys are down for it.
I saw one about, can you train art? Do you want to take a swing?
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, I want to talk about it because like I'm like an artsy kind of guy. I'm like, I just have fun with it. You can't, again, this is not a script, right? Because the person needs to own it, but you can show them pathways. For example, I took improv because I needed to learn to get more comfortable being my weird self. So when I walk in that door and I have to open up a door and walk into an office, I can at least just boom, ready to go, action, and have fun just doing what I normally do, just being my silly self. So my coach didn't like train me to go walk in the door and say certain things. What he did was he provided environments for me to get really comfortable being awkward all the time. So that way I could just get more confident being my unique self. So I think you can create scenarios, situations, environments, share the frameworks that enable creativity, but each person has to go on that journey and make the choice and raise their hand to put in the work to, get to that final product.
Someone posted, I think it was Nikki, hire the art, train the science, coach both. There's a saying that why artists are starving, that they suck at the science of selling. So, I've worked with a group of artists in a consulting fashion with someone else, and they didn't get it. So that a lot of art and creativity, but couldn't understand the business aspect of it. It's a good question, what comes first or what you can train. My initial thought is, I think, Jake, you said you can get B players just from the science. So it really depends on the structure or organization that you have.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a nice set of B players on a team with a couple of A stars, and those A stars, I think, develop their art through their own experience over time. It's not something, at least in my experience, I was necessarily born with. I think just through trial and error, reading certain books, mindset, getting confident and comfortable with who you are is really important. And stop worrying about the sale. Get the fear out of the whole everything we're talking about, the whole business, because there's no way to create your art and come off really with your signature moves if you're going into any sales call, any process with worry or fear. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, but that's a whole nother topic.
So what do you guys, so what is your, so Ken, I like this one. What is your signature sales move? So you talked, like you said, everybody has a sales move, because I'm like thinking about this now. Chris, you're going to be up next. Like what is your signature sales
mine
move?
is not wanting the sale and communicating in a way that makes them feel that, one, I don't need the sale. Two, you shouldn't move forward with me unless I can provide you with this, this, and this. So it's really more of a mindset of, for example, when I say the most important part of this process, do you know who that is? And they're like, no, or what it is. And they're saying it's the demo, it's this. I go, no, it's you. And it's putting it back on them that it's their responsibility to pick the right company, the right person to move forward with, and taking myself out of the drama of the sale and stepping back and being more of a director, or even just being in the audience. So I don't know how to, those who are in acting may know that, understand that. Those who are in movie production, there's a feeling you have when you go on the phone and you pull yourself out of that drama. To me, that's my signature move. It's doing what others won't do or say, because I really don't care about selling you. It sounds like, now, do I care about helping you? Absolutely, but I don't care about selling you.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what there's someone, Steve, asked for kind of clarification, which I think you did. Chris, what's your signature move besides the vest and tie? Obviously part of your signature move is the vest and tie, 100%.
Right. Oh, 100%, dude. Like, people memorize me just because of this, especially being in San Francisco where no one dresses up. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I just like to look fly every day. What's wrong with that? Yeah. So I think for me, like, my signature piece is really more so on the experience. Like, I always tell every prospect, like, I'm going to make this as much fun as possible. And they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, this should be fun. Right. So in my mind, like, I always want to take you on a journey, because I think sales is a journey. And like, someone just made a beautiful example last week, so I'm going to steal it. It's like, I'm Yoda, you're Luke Skywalker. I'm just trying to make you more awesome than you already are. And we're going to go through this story together. I'm going to learn about who you are personally, weave that in. I'm going to tell stories. Like, it's just like, to me, it's massive storytelling. But I put you at the center. I'm putting you before my commission check. I'm putting you before closing for the month of the quarter end. And when you really come across that empathetically and you carry yourself well, and your actions and words are aligned, like, that all together is kind of like the move. So it's not like one thing, I would say. It's a combination of the way I approach it, who's at the center of my world, because it's not me, it's the prospect. And I've recommended the competitors many times. I actually won deals because of that. I'm like, here's who you should buy. Here's what you're going to buy. Have at it. And then you check on the, like, it sucks, it's not working out. I'm like, yeah, I know that. But again, I value the honesty and transparency. So I recommend that. They're like, okay, now we want to work with you. So I think it's an entire package. I don't know if I have like a final move per se, like, some WWE wrestling, but I think it's just the compelling experience.
The signature move. Well, I mean, but yeah, you've got some Chris. Yeah, there's definitely some Chris stuff in there. The wadded up paper. I've never heard that one before.
Oh, it's a blast, man.
Yeah,
Got, like,
I could see that working. Like,
Well, in door-to-door sales years ago, and those that I'm aging myself, you knock on a door in merchant services and you dangle your keys and to let them know that you're in there. I never really did that, but that's like someone's signature move. You probably wouldn't do that these days, but that worked for them in the 90s, and you know, as
I
years go
guarantee that
on,
shit would work today, Ken. I guarantee it. That's the whole point. Like, I feel like maybe that is what I feel like we're not teaching these techniques anymore. Like what I see happening, and this is maybe what Nikki was asking. I don't see us teaching sales techniques anymore. I see us so focused on, and again, that goes back to, can you train art? I can train different techniques, and then maybe you find your move in the techniques, and that allows you to do it. And that is what I feel like is happening, is we're training sometimes on a methodology or a process. Sometimes we're training on how to fill things out in Salesforce, so I've got my data. But we're not, for whatever reason, and maybe it's that, you know, there's always that part of sales where people view it as manipulation. And just because of the way our society has shifted from a cultural standpoint, that I think that maybe leaders today are even like more scared to like teach people to put themselves out there or to do things that could be perceived as manipulative for whatever reason. And I think any sales tactic, you could, even if you say, oh, I'm trying to help or whatever, like, because I say the same thing. I feel like those are the skills that we're not teaching. We're not teaching people and this goes back to like why there's a right and a wrong way. The way that you phrase a question has a direct impact on the response that you get.
Yep.
Right. If I say, hey, Ken, I'd love to be able to set up time later this week if your boss is available, right? Versus like, hey, Ken, based on the conversation, typically what we'll do next is loop in Larry, assuming that XYZ makes sense. Does that work for you? I'm saying the exact same concept, but the technique, you know what I mean? The technique on how we do it is what matters. And that is to me a lot of like the great artists. The great artists, like there's some like, in like the signature move is like, it's the techniques that, you know, like think about WWE wrestling, right? They all have their different moves, and they also like, you know, have different techniques and ways that they wrestle and things like that too. We don't have to go down a WWE rabbit hole here, but yeah, I feel like that's maybe what people are maybe like at the heart of some of these questions, right? It's like, there's this process in science, there's an art, because again, like for you, Chris, like improv works. For other people, they're the opposite, and they've got to figure out how to make being an introvert or some version of that, you know, work for them. And so I feel like it's that techniques that we're just not doing it. You know,
what I'd also say too is like, I think we need to spend more time understanding buyer psychology and the emotions that your buyer are going through during the entire sales process. Like, I've gotten fanatical on storytelling, psychology, and the emotions that my buyer are feeling, because it's a freaking emotional roller coaster. Because sometimes your product is going to mean that they have to lay people off. Sometimes your product is going to make someone lose their star power because they were just like at that cross center, and your product's going to unlock that roadblock now, and you don't even understand that. So all these things kind of go sideways because we didn't learn that there's so much psychology, because we're irrational beings. I don't care what you tell me. You're irrational. You make emotionally based decisions, and then you find the logic to justify the emotions. That's the way the mind works. But we need to understand that that's the way the mind works, and then to identify when we're hitting on the do not hit button with particular sales scripts or the way we ask questions, because then that triggers it at that lizard brain, never gets to the logical thinking center, and now your deal's torched and you don't even know what happened.
Yeah. Or the times when Chris, I was just going to say, or the time, Chris, when I don't want your frontal cortex to kick in. And so I'm going to ask, like the way that I just asked that, does that work for you, Chris? Like those are the things that gets me the lizard brain response that moves a deal forward faster, as opposed to you're like, wait, he wants to loop my boss. Why does he want to loop my boss? What did this have? And then the frontal cortex kicks in and I'm like, no. You phrase the question exactly like this, because there are certain times when pauses are bad in sales. And it's that type of shit people just aren't talking about. We're not talking about how to use pauses like strategically. We're not talking about how to speak in the affirmative versus permission. Like that is the type of art stuff. But again, it is the science. It's the behavioral science as a part of this stuff?
I think for me, it's a good point. For me, being in sales so long, you intuitively start doing that so often, and as part of it, you almost don't even recognize what you're doing is a technique, and it becomes hard to even teach it because you're just so used to doing it. It's natural. It becomes natural now, intuitive, and you're like, what, until you hear yourself, until someone else coaches me and says, look how well you're doing this, this, and this, and pulls that out so I can then bring that to my sales team. No matter what, when you're selling, when you're on this call, you're in the drama. And that's why it's important to have an outside perspective, not your manager typically, because they're in the drama, right? They're worried about their numbers, their boss hitting their goals. But an outside influence, whether it's another coach, a peer, someone that is not affected by you succeeding or not. And then being able to say, here's what you're doing, here's what, and pull that out and say, here's those techniques that are working or not, and how you can then share that with others.
Yeah, but
even myself, I have a lot of techniques. I would have to literally study myself and listen to my calls and my videos and then write them down, because it becomes too natural that I don't even think about it.
Yeah, I think I know most of my techniques. I mean, because I watch so much game film, right? Like, that's exactly it. Like, Larry commented here, and said, the key is the repetition. It's like, great people who are great, it looks natural, but to make it look natural took the tens of hours in the gym. So, all right, I want to get tactical here. All right, so look, we can keep pontificating. We got 8-9 minutes left. I can go a little bit longer if you guys can. Yeah. A lot of people want to know tactical techniques. So we're talking about the art. All right, what are some of your go-to techniques? So we're talking about the science of psychology / the art. What are some of your go-to techniques that you've seen consistently work in sales?
I'll take a swing at it, and I'll just kind of load it for context. Let's say you have your discovery call, right? One of the techniques that I absolutely love doing is you need to do your pre-research, Jake. You've talked about it too. Spend 15-20 minutes. It's the industry, it's the vertical, it's the company, it's the person you're selling to and their seniority. But then find something personal about them. So I just had a call with a nonprofit last week. This is the CEO of a nonprofit. It's a pretty large deal we have ongoing. I found out that she's an artist. Do you want to know how I started the conversation? I was like, I want to get to know more about you. I'm like, I saw that you're an artist. I'm like, let's just talk about that right now. Who cares about all my stuff and everything else? Let's just get to know you as an individual, because people do business with those that they know and trust. So a tactical thing is, and you need to be authentic, y'all. Don't just steal a script and, I want to make commission, because you're going to screw it. So you need to be authentic, but I make it about the person and I find something. And if I can't find anything, then I say, look, I've tried to research you and do my homework, but I couldn't find anything. So I just love to learn a little bit more about who you are and how you got to where you are today. And that's such a great way to humanize your conversations instead of just being a robot and a salesperson. So there's my one tactical way that I run a discovery call.
All right. So discovery call for you, build a little bit of rapport up front, right? So it's and I think that we're all I think that that's a very classic, right? Sales is by nature a kind of a slightly adversarial, right? It's this person's on this side. So when you do that up front, it helps to kind of lower their guard a little bit. And then it softens the rest of the questions that you're asking, right? It softens some more of those. So, all right. So we're going to come back because I want to do 2 or 3 each. I'll give a couple of mine that I think are the most important. The first is the order of how you ask the discovery questions, meaning you have to, the very first question that I ask is around who is this person and how do they fit in their organization, right? And whether it's a VP or a CEO, because I know that there's a 99% chance that I do not have the only person involved in this process on this first call. And chances are I'm probably not even talking to the right person. So as soon as I know who this individual is, great. So Chris, I work with a lot of VPs of operations. What are your 2 core areas of responsibility? Tell me about the team. Then the next set of questions is macro goals. Chris, in the operations group, what are the top 2 priorities in 2020? And then I ask at least 2 layered questions after every question. Why? Tell me more. Why? Tell me more. Then what are you doing today? because I'm telling you, most people have it twisted. They'll go straight to like, oh, great, how are you tackling this problem? As soon as you make a conversation tactical and it's about the solution, it is so difficult to go have a business conversation. My superpower is I know more about people's business. There's a high likelihood that I know more about their industry and what's happening than they do, because that's my job in sales, is to be an expert in their industry. I can't help you if I don't know how you make money. And so if I want to talk about your business and business goals, not the tactical way that you're doing X, Y, Z right now. And I think for me, like, that's why I go back to the discovery. Who am I talking to? What are their macro goals? And then why are those a priority now, to make sure there's really a pain or an issue there? And now what are you doing to solve it? Versus people jump in too quick to the now what do you do to solve it? So that is my go-to technique for the discovery. That's it. Ken, you're up next. Then we're going to do another round through.
I mean,
that's my favorite part.
I think you guys summed it up fairly well. It also depends on the industry and if it's inbound or outbound, door to door. Your inbound selling for me has been with companies I work for in Yard to Kitchen. They're calling me or they're calling in. So my first, from the science side of the technique, is what compelled you to reach out to us? I want to know why you're calling. I can't tell you how many salespeople don't ask that simple first question. They're calling you. There's a reason why they're calling. Why they're calling you is your ammunition to leverage for the rest of the freaking call.
Can I push back? I hate that question up front. I hate it. Yeah, and let me just tell you, and I want to talk, I think this,
for B2C, it works.
I still, let me just tell you why. And because I want to hear your take on it, because B2C, B2B, it doesn't matter to me. Like, it's because it's usually something tactical. There's a tactical need that they have, or their boss told them to, or their husband told them to, or something, right? My husband said and for me, I like to wait and see if instead I can understand more about the macro. There's some transactional things that for sure, but I don't know, like, I feel like people rely on that here's what I hear sometimes, they rely on that as a crutch. They're like, well, he said that. And so they anchor to that one thing of why they called in, and they don't ask the broader questions. And so then they like miss that, like, they could have anchored that one thing to these other three things that were also important to that individual. And so,
well, I mean, it's one question out of many. So for example, you know, what compelled you to call out? Well, in the B2C world I was in, we're looking to do this because we want to start eating healthier. And then you could start asking questions around that. Can you explain what healthier means to you? How often will you be using this type of service? That's worked for me in B2C and B2B with an inbound, when we're dealing with inbound calls. Otherwise, I see what you're saying from a macro standpoint. If you're doing outbound, obviously, when I did medical device sales, we're making outbound calls. We spent 3 to 5 minutes minimum researching who we're calling, why we're calling, and get a more macro approach to the conversation, because it's a complex sale. You're dealing with many influences. You're dealing with, having to deal with champions within the organization. But a lot of these I come from a very high transactional background. High transactional, you're getting usually the decision maker on the phone, either inbound or outbound. For me, we've had success with just getting right to the point. I'm not one to dance around and massage it. There's a reason you're calling. Why are you calling? Let's see how we can help you and find out what the pain is and what the gap is, and move you to a better outlook tomorrow. That's what it all comes down to. How you get there is part of this discussion.
Chris, next one. Final tactic for you. Let's go through it. The techniques.
Final tactic.
You already gave some good ones, like the crumpled one.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Crumpled letter. So I'm just going to go through outbound, because we all want to do outbound right now. So you have crumpled letter. You have like a green smoothie. You have a coffee stained letter. You have a travel around the world letter. You have a pre-burnt letter. Every single time you are creating a unique, uncanny experience like you never had before. Add some humor to it, make it fun. Like the coffee stain letter literally has a coffee stain on it. I'm like, this is for your coffee mug, because we know most of the sales material you get is better served as a coaster. So I've done you the favor and made you a coaster. So again, like, get creative and have fun. Laughter.
Did you learn this? Did you learn that shit? Okay,
all right. Dude,
but Chris, I think that's an important call out. These are techniques that you've that have worked and you've made them your own and probably mutated a few of them, right?
Oh, yeah, you got to learn these. Like, but then like the green smoothie, man, like I started making up some like random stuff. So it's like you just try. Like another one I have like a mad scientist and like a cake. Like I'm gonna send you a cake, and on the back of it's gonna be steps that we actually take through our sales process and the value and benefits. So you just start getting really funky and weird with it. But as long as it's value and beneficial to your audience and it creates a memorable, compelling experience more so than another boring email, you're going to get a response. Now they may not like it. Not everyone likes it, but at least they told you no. You're not sitting in the abyss of no response, which is the majority of what salespeople are getting.
I love it, dude. And it actually is really, I think the other thing is the reason we've migrated this way is scalability, right? We're nervous. We want things to be scalable. And what you're talking about is scalable. And I think that's just an important thing for people to understand. Like, this is not some crazy thing Chris is doing. He's got a template and he's doing some customization and he's mailing this shit. So it's taking like this much longer, but he knows that his success rate's going to go here. And I feel like that's a big one. All right, Ken, next technique that you've used over that works for you.
I like getting personal with my prospects or buyers or customers and getting to know what they enjoy doing outside of this phone call and business. And once, for me, obviously a lot of people know I run and do marathons. So if you're listening and you're a salesperson and trying to get my attention, provide something for me that has nothing to do with my business. So I've given away books, technology information, any information that's going to be of leisure enjoyment or benefit or value to that person. So I like to think of it as coming into it as a friend versus just a business relationship. I've been doing that since the 90s with my clients and prospects. And what's nice is if you think like that, it forces you to have conversations that take it to more personal. And to me, that's where I built quick trust right away with prospects. And the quicker you build trust, the quicker you get relationships, and eventually they become clients.
Yeah, I love that because again, it's interesting. Like, again, it goes back to I think about techniques for me. I am the opposite. I don't need another fucking friend in Seattle. I don't need another friend in Portland. I'm here to help your business. And that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to build rapport and you're going to like me and we're going to laugh and stuff. That's great. But at the end of the day, if I can't help you to move here, and the thing is, because my approach is I research your business. And I think there's neither, this isn't a right or wrong. It's that for me, right? For me, if I tried to do what you're doing, Ken, it wouldn't be authentic. But I love talking about, I get in the weeds on their business before I have the call. So then I can build rapport around trends in their space and what they're to Chris's, the buyer persona. That's my comfort zone, so for me, and I think that this is important for people to understand is each of you are going to find the techniques that worked. Because for me, I tried to do that. Ken, trust me, I would try to do that too. And it would be I just felt inauthentic because it wasn't me. It's not, I actually didn't give a shit. I didn't care. And so, when I was executing it, I couldn't do it. Don't get me wrong. I'll say, oh, I see you like to golf and that, but I don't want to, I want to talk about the golf stuff for about 7 seconds. And then I want to go back over here because, and I think that this is important. You and I have learned all these different techniques and Chris is learning these techniques. And then you kind of find your wheelhouse. And I think as a seller, you're Ken, you call it your signature move, right? Your signature moves. You start to figure those out over time. And I think it's such an interesting one that for me, the number one question I ask every seller, my last one is, how does this company make money? And if you cannot help someone's company if you don't know how they make money. And that is the one technique, and I'll well, they're a manufacturing company. What kind of manufacturing? Can't help me. You can't help my business if you don't know how I make money. So that is my go-to beating like beating the drum. But I think that these are good, man. I think you've got 3 different people. For those of you stuck around, you got 3 different people, different parts of their sales career. All of us have planned probably thousands of sales meetings. We've all done transactional, then we've done other types of selling too. And I think what you're hearing is that, I'll give my kind of quick summary. It's that the art and the science and the techniques are all kind of intertwined, in that if you're going to excel, Ken, you talked about this, getting uncomfortable and moving out of certain like areas, that could have been your safe home, and continuing to try new things. Chris, obviously the beautiful part about being 3 years into your sales career is you don't have bad habits. You're still learning that stuff, and so I think that that's an important part of this, that a lot of people, they get stuck when they get older because they find those patterns that worked, and then the patterns start working because the buyer behavior changes.
Yeah.
But the techniques kind of don't go away. The techniques, like you said, Ken, you're talking about shit in the 90s. I'm like, this stuff we're talking about is like 90s, because this is just human nature stuff. So closing thoughts, guys, before we wrap up.
I mean, the only closing thought I would have is remove yourself from the center of your universe. Like, you're not important, your buyer is. And when your buyer wins, you win by default as a sales professional. So the sooner we stop focusing on our commission checks, the sooner we start focusing on truly helping and delivering like tangible value, the better off we're all going to be. And it's going to feel a lot better. And you're going to sleep a lot better at night too.
Yeah, I think for me, if you're not having fun at this, you're doing it wrong. And every part of the sales process, as soon as you wake up till you go to sleep, if it's not enjoyable, there's work to be done. And it's a mindset process, not a sales set process.
Love it. All right, y'all. Thank you. This is fun. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate it. I think we covered like everything.
I think we did.
I love it. Dude, I'm telling you, if you are in sales, you should tag your friends into this. We'll share it with everyone. But I think this is like just a really good conversation for anyone in sales to hear, from, just a lot of really tactical stuff. So I appreciate you guys.
Hey,
Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, Chris. Take care, everyone.
Take care.